So there we go. Okay, so thanks again for joining us. I'm super excited to have Wynand, so let's get into it. We wanted to talk about how does a will and financial planning fit into estates? And what I'm referring to is, of course, wrapping up of estates, because I have been in this game for a long time, and dealing with deceased estates, man, it comes with its trials and tribulations. And I thought tonight we need to talk about this topic. So let's move on here. Let me just get my mouse to the right screen. There we go. So me, you know me, and there is Wynand and all his naughty badges. Wynand, tell us more about you and your family and your mountain biking passions, please.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, so I think that Renate's got my sort of shortened bio up there. I'm a financial planner. I enjoy the engagement with our clients, probably a bit more than just doing the sums in the background. I think that's Renate's forte. But yeah, I've been in the financial planning industry for about 17, 18 years. We run a general practice, so we help our clients with estate planning, investment planning, retirement planning. We have a lot of business owners as clients who we help to structure their affairs appropriately. We see some interesting things out there in the industry. Yeah, so I think for my part, I've been around the block a few times. We tend to steer away from that which glows in the dark, and we try and really keep things simple. I have a wife, 2 daughters, whom I like a lot. And in my free time, I like to ride some, mountain bike up and down a hill and spend time outside. I think most of us, or a lot of us, probably feel like we've been under house arrest for the last 2 years. So, I think getting out, for me, has become incredibly important. But yeah, so that's me. And thank you, Renate, for the opportunity to be on your show tonight.
Oh, thanks, man. And thanks for spending the time with us, Wynand. So just a little bit of history with Wynand and myself. We've been, partners in crime and doing business together for what, the better part of 15 years? How long have you been married?
15.
You've been
15
married?
years.
Okay, so we've been doing that since before you met your wife, eh?
Yes.
So yeah,
yes.
we've and we both have a passion for doing the right thing. And I think that's where Wynand and myself's relationship has just worked so well together. Wynand loves the peopling side of things, as he's just mentioned. And I love the dark corner, thick textbook, big calculator type of thing. So we work very well together as a team. And I really like and I think anyone that's been in my circle, Wynand's circle, people that have worked with me, people that have joined these masterclasses, that listen to my podcasts, know that for me, ethics and honorability and doing the right thing is so important. And I think that's also what is so important about tonight's topic, is what we wanted to get across, the message we wanted to get across. So yes, that's where Wynand and myself come along, and we've worked together this long. And finally, I've managed to pin him down to share his pearls of wisdom. So what we will talk about is, as I mentioned, where does a will fit in? What is financial planning in short? We're not writing a thesis here. And then the impact of the will and financial planning on estates. And I know that one of our audience members is a financial planner. And I think even for you, and I'd love to hear your comments as we go along on what we discuss here tonight, because I think so often we are so in the mode of, we know what financial planning is. This is what we do for a living. This is where our comfort zone is. But how clearly are we getting this message across to our clients? And how well do we engage with them, and how well is our audience, our client, getting the message? We may think that the message is landing, but is it truly landing? So let's start then at the beginning. So Wynand, you and I have spoken about this so often. Where does a will fit in? And I wanted to touch on this topic because I think it was this month or last month was Wills Month. I always get confused. It's like one month just goes into the next month. And everyone was offering these free wills and wills. And often clients have this thing in their head that, okay, well, at least if I've got this will done, then I'm sorted. And that's where it stops. And they have this idea that a will equates financial planning, or that a will is all I need. Now, don't get me wrong. A will is important and we should have a will. But I think it's very difficult to just start with a will and then assume things are going to work. And I see the fallout of that when I'm trying to wrap up these estates. The one estate that I'm working with now, I dealt with this man 18 months before his passing. And his auditor had brought him along to meet with me. We were doing very high level calculations, a very high net worth individual. And I had already pointed out then that there were gaps, and that there were gaps in his will, that there were gaps in his planning. And at no point from the time that I was meeting with him and the auditor and all his different financial planners, because he also had a host of financial planners, at no point did we all get into one room was it allowed for us to get in one room to actually chisel out a proper plan. And now I'm dealing with the fallout, because now all of a sudden there are clauses in this will that can be read in many different ways. You read a clause and the one clause may say, I leave to this entity the difference between the net asset value of the entity and a certain amount. And that's what the clause says. Okay. So, but what about the loan account? Because the entity owes to the deceased money. Where does that fall in? Now, if that drops the net asset value, does it mean that we now go up or down? In whose favor? And from both parties, this now becomes a bone of contention. And the whole idea was, the wish of the intention of the testator was, I want to actually write off that loan account with this bequest. They owe me X amount. They actually owe me more than my bequest. So by me bequeathing this amount to them, I actually settle the loan account for them, so they don't have to pay me and I don't have to pay them. It's not how it's working. So do we start with a will or don't we? And Wynand, you and I discussed this, and you said to me, no, let's go to start. We can't collect 200 unless we've been to start. So over to you. Let's kick off with, let's go to start.
Thank you, Renata. So yeah, I think for me, when we were trained, in financial planning, and I think that is still the sort of recommended strategy, is to get a hold of a client's will, which a lot of clients, don't have one, or they've got one that is 10 years old, or they wrote it or signed it with their previous spouse. So it's not always such a dependable document. And I think the main purpose behind that was purely to see what the intentions of the testator or the testatrix would be. And what we have found is that in most cases, it's necessary to redraft the will, or to bring it in line with current legislation. So we've just found it in our practice a bit easier to start with, what are your assets? What is your asset base? Companies, if there are any trusts or loan accounts, etc. So what are we actually dealing with? Let's put everything on the table. And then the next question is, who do you care for? So is there a Mrs. X or a Mr. X? Are there any kids? Do you, have any interests or any philanthropic sort of desires? And then the next question is, how much do you care? In other words, how much should each of these people that you care for, benefit or receive from your estate? And I think for me, that is the sort of gist of the process, in terms of determining what are the wishes of the testator or the testatrix, and is it possible to divide those assets up, as whole assets, or do they need to be, would they need to be sold to pay for costs and expenses, etc., which is, I think, where Renata comes in, because she would be I think you would find it a lot easier to have those difficult discussions.
Well, yeah, we just don't have any emotion about the outcome. But I think also this is where you have to be able to, as the saying goes, see the wood for the trees. Because unless you have a real connection with your client and what I'm referring to as a real trust relation with your clients, unless you've built up trust and you've got that likability factor, oh, sorry about that, and you've got where a client will divulge information. What often happens is at this go to start point, already the wheels come off because often not everything is disclosed. I've certainly seen this in my 20 years dealing with trusts, for 20 odd years dealing with trusts. People would come to me and the one part is, yes, we need to get assets to trust, but a big part of that also is that we need to look at the entire estate because you need to know what it is you're trying to get into the trust. What is the long-term effects of that? Why are we going with it? What is the lifetime intention of these things? And then you need to have all the facts on the table. And I cannot tell you how often it would happen that I would deal with clients and we would be years down the line. And then either because, and literally this would happen, they would mention but what about this property? And you go, but you've never mentioned this property before. Oh, we forgot. Or they would see you this week with the wife and children. And then they would come back and see you again later, and there would now be no wife and children, and now they can fully disclose other information. So it's important to understand that you do need a safe space where you can actually get all that information. Wynand, maybe on your side, have you experienced that? How did you get around that if you have experienced it?
Yeah, I think with our practice, it's a fairly small practice as they go. We don't have hundreds of advisors here. And a lot of the clients that we work with, we have worked with for 5 years, 10 years or more. And, new clients coming on board, we're very particular in who we take on. We almost have a sort of, do we get the right feeling before we move forward? Life is just too short to deal with people that have too much drama in their lives. And if it's drama that we can fix and carry on, then that's fine. But yeah, we've seen some interesting things, and there are typical questions that sort of come up when people are making certain plans. So when a couple's relationship starts going on the rocks, you'll find questions like, should we set up a trust? And can we put this property in there? And can we do this? And can we do that? And we don't really want to get involved in processes where one party is really trying to cheat another or to act in an unfair way. But yeah, Renata, you're absolutely correct. A proper discovery process, as in, not the insurer, but as in discovering and finding out what is really, cooking. And, I like to use pictures and to try and draw out all the assets and how they are connected to each other. And, we've come across clients with some crazy structures, which I don't know if they really serve much more of a purpose than to just be complicated. And when the clients themselves don't even know what the heck's going on, then you should start asking questions. We had a meeting yesterday where this particular client structure is so complicated, their taxes are behind by about a decade. And if we can't figure things out while they're alive, how are we ever going to figure them out if they've passed away?
And that is exactly the point of sorting this out during your lifetime. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about spending time doing these masterclasses, doing podcasts, doing articles, all of this content being put out there free of charge so that we can educate and make sure that when we do deal with our clients, that we give them the right advice, we follow the right procedures so that when they then do pass away, that we are not left with this ball of wool that's all knotted and you just can't find where to start the process. So, okay, we now hopefully get them to divulge all information and give us the pot of gold and to tell us what's in there and who it's going to, what they wish, where it must go. So then, of course, we've got now we get to the actual drafting of this will and what it is that we want to do. And yeah, as you said, Wynand, this is now where where we have to ask, so what are your wishes? And that would tie in again with, what do I have? How much do I care? And so who do I care for and how much do I care? So this is where my wishes are. But then it's one thing to have the wishes, and it's quite another to have those wishes come true. And what we mean with this is, yeah, it's all well and fine to say, I would love to leave to my spouse 20 million rand. Do you have 20 million rand to leave to them? Is it even your 20 million rand to leave to them? I think a clear case of this would be, for instance, Wynand, and you would have seen this as well in your time. I know we've had, I think, some of our combined joint clients experiences as well, where when they have retirement funds and they they note the beneficiaries on these retirement funds as one party, but then when they pass away, the trustees of that retirement fund will sit and go, well, these are not necessarily the financially dependent parties, and as such, they will, the trustees of this fund will then decide where the funds will go. I've certainly had that in my case. So this is now, again, can the wishes come true from one side? It can be something like a farm. If I own a farm and I've got two sons, can I actually bequeath this farm to two parties? Well, not if you live in South Africa with our Property Control Act. So you need to understand that, yes, you may have certain wishes, but can this document make it come true? Because you can write in that will what you want. It does not mean that it is that it can actually happen. I don't want to use the word enforceable necessarily, but is it implementable, one should rather say. And then, of course, can you afford your wishes? And this is where estate liquidity comes in. I mean, one of the estates I'm working with at the moment, it's, let's call it approximately 170 odd, let's call it 180 million. And with all the various things and the estate duties and capital gains taxes, I'm currently juggling a 12 million rand shortfall. So now all of a sudden we need to start seeing where we're getting that money from. And that's after policies have paid to the estate. So sometimes what we want to happen and what can happen is not necessarily possible. And this is where we now go back to, well, do we start with a will? Well, we can't really, because if we had done the calculations and the proper estate plan, the proper liquidity calculations, we would have been very well aware of the fact that we would have this liquidity shortfall if we had died, and we would have known to make provision for it. Wynand, any stories from your side to make this more real? I just want to silence this one phone.
You know, you mentioned the treatment of retirement funds, and we had an issue a few years, probably about 10 years ago, where, you know, a couple was, you know, married. They were grown up already when they got married, so they each had their own children. And the wife passed away, and she left, you know, in terms of beneficiary nominations on policies, in terms of her will, everywhere that you could possibly nominate anything, she basically left her estate to a trust that existed at the time, and that was for the benefit of her children who were in their teenage years. And I got to see the husband, and he had no problem with the fact that, you know, all of her assets and money, you know, was meant to go to the trust. But the trustees of the various retirement funds, in their wisdom, had deemed him to be a financial dependent, and they paid him. They wanted nothing to do with trust payments or payments to the kids. I mean, they paid proportionately a bit to the children, or allocated. And then our problem was that this husband, and guess, you know, believe it if you will, he wanted to put this money that I had received into the trust. The problem was that it was quite a substantial amount, and he would be liable for donations tax on that. So we made him aware of that. He went and saw SARS, and lo and behold, they actually said, you know what, we see what you're trying to do. We're not going to charge you donations tax. So he was able to wrap that up. But had he just gone and done it, he would have been liable for 20% donations tax on whatever he had paid into the trust. In excess, I think at those days it was still 100,000.
Yep.
So, and also in terms of financial planning, a lot of people think that because they took out a policy 7 years ago, they've got a financial plan.
Yep.
No, it's not a plan. It's a policy. It's, I think we try and steer, we do have relationships with the insurance companies, but it's almost like a last resort. I think if you go to the doctor and you have high blood pressure, the rule is they should recommend lifestyle changes first, start jogging, eat the right food, etc., stress less. And if none of that stuff works, here's some medicine. And I think policies, can serve an extremely valuable purpose, but they should also not always be the very first port of call to solve any problem. And the fact that you've got a policy doesn't mean you have a plan.
Great. And that actually brings us straight into our next discussion, which is just trying to get our faces out the way again. So what is a financial plan, or what is financial planning? And often I found this image, I think on LinkedIn, and I thought that was such a brilliant image because it really so clearly depicts what I so often hear. And yes, it's not just insurance and investments. This is truly what we hear out there, what people think is the first go-to. It's just investments. It's just insurance, but it really isn't. It's everything below that. It is everything that we need to deal with. And it often starts with, and I see this when I deal with business owners from a financial planning, and I'm not talking to sell the policies, I'm talking from a financial structuring in the business, the planning of the finances in the business, the budgeting, the financial coaching and mentoring, let's call it. That's before we even get to the actual personal financial plan of this person. When we just look at the businesses, it starts with your money stories, your money beliefs. It often starts with your first memories. How were you raised? What were your beliefs in your house? What did your parents believe? And what were the stories that you bought into and you've carried with you all these years? Because those stories often will become your stories, and you will either be exactly the same, or if those stories weren't serving you, you will be trying to do the direct opposite, which may also not be serving you. So there's so much more to financial planning. And that is the message that we should get out there, that it's, as Wynand said, I think this was so eloquently said, Wynand, that an insurance policy is almost like a last resort. It is once you've worked through everything else and you say, this is it serves a particular purpose. So for instance, if we look at the retirement planning, then we will look at what are the various products available to prepare you for retirement. And is that even a product? What does retirement look like for you? Is retirement an age or a lifestyle? Someone asked me the other day, well, what is retirement? And I said to them, for me personally, retirement means no more children in my home. That's what retirement is for me. Retirement allows me to spend time traveling when I want to travel, eating what I want to eat when I want to eat it, and spending my money on what I want to do, and working. I don't want to stop working. I love what I do. I love having my nose in a book somewhere and doing a difficult calculation. So it depends on what is retirement for your client. And if you don't even understand that, then I think it's very difficult to just go and plug in an RA. Oh, I need to look out for my retirement. Okay, well, then you need a retirement annuity. Not necessarily. We need to understand where all these things fit together. Because remember, at the end, when we want to tie it all in a bow with a will, we need to bring all these things into account. Education planning. When we look at education planning, people may think, oh, that's my kids going to private school. Maybe not. What if it is also, I have a child in matric, a child in his last year of varsity and now wanting to do his honors next year. I may have a master's degree I want to do next year. That's the education plan. It doesn't just mean children at school. And so we can go through all of those. But I think what's so important, the bottom one there, preparation for life transitions. And life transitions happens every time there's a big change. Relocation is a very big thing at the moment. Relocation for lifestyle, relocation for reasons because you may have lost your job, because maybe you've gained another job, maybe because you are wanting to go overseas, maybe because you want to relocate to the coast, maybe because your children are entering school, leaving the house, divorce, marriage. There are so many life transitions, and we need to be able to prepare for those. And in any one of those, our will at the end would need to tie in with those life transitions, either for our life transitions or for those that we are leaving behind. And I want to actually move on to the next picture, because this is from Wynand, and I really like this because this is how Wynand sees it, and this is how I see sums. And I think this so clearly sums it up, is what we get and how we sort it out to then close that gap. So Wynand, tell us more from your side on the idea of where this financial planning then fits in and where the will plugs in.
Thanks, Renata. So yeah, we very seldom get handed the right-hand side of this picture where everything is neat and tidy. If we do get it, I stop and I enjoy the moment. But it is mostly, on the left, what we're presented with in terms of assets, liabilities, what do I want to have happening here, there, and everywhere. And for me, just to distill it down, I would say that, once we have an idea of what a client's life, exists or, consists of, what it is that they would like to achieve, and then, specific to the will, how they would like things to be divided or assets to be divided. For us, the will, we almost see it as an instruction manual. So it's an instruction. I've even thought of it as a letter of thanks, where you can express your gratitude to those who have played a part in your life, and you can even write it into your will. There's no reason that it should just be a standard template document. We have seen some of our clients, we prompt them and they've written some of the most beautiful, paragraphs or thanking everyone who's played a part in their life. And then, how we divide up assets is that's sort of the business end of it, but there's no reason that, will can't express a bit of emotion as well. I don't know why it's only in the movies where you have people sitting around and the will gets read and everyone is very surprised or not surprised. Nowadays, everything is very impersonal with internet and all of that. But yeah, so I think it's also, it's a recurring process. So even for someone who doesn't move and shake a lot, we would prefer to review their financial plan and they will, at least on a yearly or sort of a twice, every 2 years basis, because things do happen. Children mature, that are, they reach the age of 18, so they're allowed to inherit. They don't have to have testamentary trusts anymore. And people come into your lives and go out of your life. So yeah, that's sort of our view on it. And yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything that you would like to add, Renata.
Yeah, so for me, it is like you say, this is something that happens periodically. It's not necessarily that it happens, it's a once and done. It is necessary to revisit as things change. And especially, I think this thing of where children can inherit, the question sometimes is, should they inherit, is the other question. And yeah, but understanding what the needs are.
Yeah.
And for me, I really love this image, because for me, this image is all about what I basically do for a living every single day. I create order from chaos. And I love this, because I think people do much better when they know where the boundaries are. And you know what, if they can go and spend their energy on other things, the things that bring in their money, their joy, their important things, and we can take care of these things, isn't that really serving a purpose for all.
I
So,
think
yeah, sorry.
sometimes, it's we get so conditioned that things should work in a certain way that, when you find someone who colors outside of the lines without doing wrong, it's interesting. So I remember coming across a couple who, they've been married for 40 years or more. They'd had a great life together. They, I think the wife was a teacher, the husband was a train driver.
Oh, wow.
And they were diligent with their financial planning and their savings. They bought shares. So over the 40 plus years of being married, they had built up a substantial share portfolio, as in 20 million rand plus. This is also about 7-8 years ago. And their son was, I think, in his mid-20s at the time. And in their will, they were very specific. Yes, he could inherit all this money and he could have access to it at the age of 65. So, there was a trust involved and all of that, but it was just, that's very surprising. So he still has to push away on his own and make things happen. And then at 65, this will, become available to him. But it's certainly not something that he can sit and go, I'll have that car and I'll go on that holiday. So that was interesting, so we see some very interesting things from time to time.
Oh, that's definitely an interesting one, like instilling the value of work ethic, I suppose. So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and this is what we deal with. So what happens when the will and the financial plan don't talk together? What happens to that estate? And I think when I saw this image, it just said it all to me, because this does not only have to be the beneficiaries. When you see this, you automatically think, oh, this is the beneficiaries fighting about what they can grab. But it does not necessarily have to be the beneficiaries. You can have, all of a sudden, I cannot tell you this estate, the big estate I'm working on now, all of a sudden, a year down the line, we have people crawling out of the woodwork. Yes, but you know what? This person owed me money. Okay, well, where's the documentation? Where's the invoice, or where's the loan agreement? No, but it was just a verbal thing. All of a sudden, everyone starts grabbing. There could be creditors, SARS. People often say, yeah, well, I don't have creditors. Well, you know what? You'll have SARS. If you have assets, you'll have SARS. You will have capital gains tax. You will have estate duty. I currently have an 18 million rand estate duty liability and about 8 or 9 million rand capital gains tax liability. And this is in a COP estate and a community of property estate. Can you imagine if it wasn't a community of property estate, it would be double that. So you see, these things can happen. You need to understand that all these things need to work together. Otherwise, you will have a situation where you've got all these different forces pulling at this estate, and you stand to lose unnecessary. You will lose money, you will lose assets, you may lose goodwill, you will lose time, but also the family members lose out. And certainly bad blood does happen. You will see family members turn against one another very quickly in a situation where they feel that they've been wronged, where they are not getting their due. So again, the financial planning is so important, because if you've planned to retire together and all of a sudden someone's life's cut short, what does that look like? Because now you leave behind a spouse. And I always find this very interesting. I'd like to hear your opinion on it, Wynand. I always find it very interesting when I see the following. So you've been married to your partner, or whether you've married or just living together is irrelevant, but you've been with this partner for 20 years. You've raised children together, and your partner has been there to support you. And maybe the partner has worked, maybe the partner hasn't worked, but their main focus really has been to raise the children, look after you, support you, make sure that the house is kept, whatever. And then the will says something like, my spouse can live in this house until they die or get remarried. When I see that clause, I want to hit the roof. And that's just my personal bit. But it's, for me, I don't understand how, when someone's been with you for 20 years and you guys have been together, why you would want to say that this person can only be there if they choose not to remarry. That, to me, I don't understand. Does that mean that this person's forgetting you? Surely people should be able to get on with their lives. But like I said, that's just my personal view. I mean, like, I would want my partner to be happy once I'm gone, not because I'm gone, but once I'm gone. So I think it is making provision for these things, just doing proper planning. And again, understanding that once you've done the financial plan and you have done the proper liquidity calculations, that you can understand then. If we go back to the slide where we started, where we said, having all our assets, who do we care for and how much do we care for them? And now we can understand, because now we've done this whole financial plan, and part of that financial plan was the estate planning, was the liquidity calculation. We can now see, okay, these are our wishes. Well, can they come true? Can we actually work with these wishes? Can what we've written down actually be implemented? And can we afford these wishes? I think for me, and for me, it's just important because I work with numbers. I just love numbers. Wynand, he loves the people more. So for him, it's more important about who you care for, how much you care for them, and can they get their due? I just want to know, well, can we afford? It's all well and dandy that you want to leave things to people. But once SARS is done with you, and once the creditors are done with you, and once your business partners are done with you, can you actually afford to have the house to your spouse? It's all well and fine to bequeath a primary residence to your spouse, but if the property is bonded to the hilt and you don't have any means of covering that bond on your death, then really, what are you leaving behind other than debt and trauma? So to tie it all together again, we want to basically create order from chaos. So we want to move from here to there. We want to make sure that we can afford these wishes, that we can actually make things come true, and that we don't have, in the end, a situation where all these different forces are pulling this estate apart. Wynand, from your side, I see we've got a question or a discussion, so I'll talk about that now. But
Yes.
From your side, what is your view here?
No, Renata agreed, and simple is better. You mentioned the spouse can only live in the house until they get remarried. I had a gentleman once who wanted to draft a will where his wife currently would get nothing. And for each child that she produces in a certain period of time, she gets a larger share of the estate.
Oh, charming.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about that.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's have a look. I see there is a question. Can I just read it out?
Thanks.
So,
yeah, Poonam asks the situation when there's only one director, so the person's an only director in the company, and they don't make provision for the legacy of the business when they die. The standard clause of the MOI, that's the Memorandum of Association, or the Memorandum of Association and Articles, which is now, I think, being replaced more by the MOIs, makes provision that the executor will take over. So basically what happens is the directors, generally what would happen is when the director passes away, you would at SIPC change the director, and the executor generally would work with the people that are inheriting the business. But yes, so this is again also where the financial plan comes in. So again, in this estate where I'm working, I use this as an example because this estate is really one of those that just has everything in it. So there are several businesses in here, and some of them, the deceased was the sole shareholder as the sole director, and then in others we had combined shareholders and directors. But let's refer to those that were sole directors. So what happened is the auditor then approached the executor, who in this case was the spouse, and they brought me on to work with the estate. And it was agreed that in certain instances, because the wife was in this case community of property, so she half owns the business, she could make the decision to change directors. And as the director, as the executor, she was then placed as the director, and they continued trading. But in this case, she also was involved in the husband's businesses. Now, in a case where you are not involved in the businesses, and this is why I think both Wynand and myself are so passionate about this, it is important for business owners to have either an exit strategy, if that was their intention, or to have the provision, the legacy, the continuation. What does this look like? Now, you would either have, if you have an exit strategy, that would mean there would be a policy, a buy and sell maybe, where you have the idea that someone is buying this business on your death. I know with financial planners, often what they would do is they would have the person that would take over the book. A lot of insurance companies have that. Accounting firms often have that, where they basically have other parties that would step in and take over their clients and their book. But there are many ways to get around that. The one would be to say, the director, the people that would come in would normally be, if your will makes provision to say, I bequeath my assets to Joe Soap. If Joe Soap is now, by virtue of assets, becoming the owner of the business, they would come in as the director, or the executive would come in, as you mentioned there, so you can handle it like that. Often what would happen is the business would basically come to an end. So a business such as mine, for instance, where I do partner with other people, but I've got a very specific role that I fulfill. In a business such as mine, it would be very difficult for someone to come in and continue my business, because my business is all about high-level calculations. And unless we have someone that can continue in that game, the person, the executive, would basically come in purely to wind up the company, to close it down, to sort out. The sad thing is that if you then have staff members and you've not made provision for these people, that people will lose their jobs, and it's a matter of, they would have a claim against the estate or against the company for salaries. But this is important, where we need to look at exits. And I know Wynand and myself have been working with one of his clients as well, on where this person has been getting on in an age, but a very, very specialized role that he plays, a very specialized career path that he has. And so as part of his exit, retirement, and continuity, he has seen it fit to bring in other people in his field, younger people whom he is now training up. And the idea is, even though he is still the shareholder and the director, over a period of time, these people will be trained up. They will be in a position to start buying shares in this business. And if they don't buy shares, that on death, there will probably then be cover where they can have life cover on this person to buy his shares out. But this is also where the lifestyle changes, or the life stages changes would come in, because as his children grow up, they may or may not be in that business. Wynand, your side, your view, because you would talk more from the, I think from the policy and planning side. I'm talking more from the practical and estate side and the rands and cents side. But your input on this.
So yeah, Poonam, thank you so much for the question. But one thing that I'd like to know is, when you refer to director, are you also talking about shareholder? So we, and I think like Renata says, certain businesses are specialized. You need certain qualifications and licensing, like financial services, for instance. I couldn't, I could pass away tomorrow, but I couldn't just, make my executor by default the new director, or my wife, because there would need to be another key individual. It would have to be approved by the FSCA. So it would have to be, and there are other industries, similar to this, where you can't just step in. So it kind of depends on what business it is. And you know, a lot of people also refer to buy and sell agreements as a business will. So, you know, you might own a business which is doing fantastically well because you're involved as a director or a main shareholder, but the business maybe couldn't continue as successfully without you at the helm. So, you know, leaving that to a spouse, or in fact, if there is no mention made of what happens to the business in your will or in the memorandum of association, then I think the value of the business or the shares of the business would be divided in terms of Interstate Succession Act or in terms of your will. So if you say that your spouse inherits everything, they'll inherit the business, but they may not be able to run the business, or they might not be in a position to run the business. So I think business owners have a lot more leeway to plan, and they've got a lot more, you know, nice things that they can do. But what a lot of business owners forget is that it obviously takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to build a business up. And I would think that you would want to monetize that business either when you step down and retire, you know, either in the form of receiving a recurring income from the business or in the form of selling it to your successors. And at death, I would think that you would want to have the same scenario where if you pass away, you don't want to leave your family with the drudgery of trying to, you know, run this business, rather give them money. So the idea would be, if it's a specialized business or if it's something that your family wouldn't necessarily want to be involved in, it's possible to find someone that would be interested in purchasing the business. And even if it's not a double-sided sort of, if it's a one-sided buy and sell agreement, you know, that's definitely something to, I would say, something to look into.
Great, thanks, Wynand. Yeah, so there are solutions, but I think the key comes back to you have to plan in advance. It's very difficult to deal with this as a fix it afterwards. So one has to actually deal with this in advance. And I think as a business owner, you do have that responsibility. And often as a business owner, that's your biggest asset. You don't see it because it's you know, but that's where the money comes from. It's what pays your house. It's what pays your investments. It's what puts your kids through school. So all of a sudden, when you pass away and that's no longer there, and that was your biggest asset, what does that look like? Because unfortunately, SARS is not really interested in what does it look like one day after you die. SARS, for value of estate and for the capital gains calculations, are the only interest is what was the value one day before death, so one day prior to death. And that is what we are dealing with. I mean, if I can just refer back again to this one estate that I'm working with, two of those companies, although they are valued at in excess of 10 million each, these businesses, literally within 2 weeks after the person passed away, trading ceased. There was no more trading that happened for these businesses, and those businesses will now be closed. And the unfortunate thing is that they still land up in the estate, and we still look at the capital gains tax because of the fact that now we go to net asset value, but still we are still in a position where even though the main shareholder passed away and no trading continues, that there was a value, there were contracts prior to death. So yeah, we do need to take that into account and make proper provision for it. And that is also why I recommend that you do get company valuations on a regular basis so that you can know what you are in for as far as your estate is concerned, if one does proper estate calculations and liquidity calculations. Okay, guys, we have reached 7:30. I always am very mindful of your time. We are here to answer questions. So please, if you want to, you're welcome to open your mic to ask a question, or you're welcome to chat more with us in the chat block. But yeah, we've reached basically the end of our discussion. So really, the next step is either we need wills reviewed, or we need to review estate plans, or there's deceased estates, and you need assistance with deceased estates. So that is why we are having this discussion tonight, is as a reminder that these are possible next steps for you guys that you may want to just put in the back of your mind that you need to look at. And this, of course, would be for your clients as well, because I know both Andrew and Poonam, you guys would deal with clients in this regard. Yeah, and then next month we are talking about business optimization, businesses again. And I know that next month I've been asked to really talk about cash flow. So most of the podcasts, most of the articles, and the masterclass will all be geared towards cash flow and employee engagement. And of course, as always, the other topics that we touch on, deceased estates and trusts. So there we go. Q&A now, Yippee. Any other questions? We are here to answer any questions for you. Andrew, I'd love to know, what did you think about this? Did you enjoy it? Anything else that we should have talked about? I see there is a hand up, but because, oh, Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's me.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Renata. The brilliant presentation as always.
Oh, thank you, man.
That was really great, really insightful panel discussion there.
Thank you.
Do you, and this goes to both of you, do you not find that often clients want their bread buttered on all sides? You know, they're not really clear about what they want. They just want it to all magically happen. You know, I find I'm treated like a used car salesman until you actually add value, which normally comes way later.
Yeah.
But you know, the question of having, because and clients tend to be a little bit immature about what they want, because they just want it all, and they want it now. They've worked hard, they've earned it, and now they get to be spoiled brats about it to a certain extent.
To a certain extent. Wynand, do you want to go before me?
Yes, so Andrew, thank you for that. And I think we've been in the same sort of trenches potentially. We had the misfortune of losing another client yesterday. She passed away unexpectedly. And this wasn't someone that we had a very frequent relationship with. So we basically touched base once a year, and that was that. We didn't share little jokes on WhatsApp or anything like that. But still, who are the first people that get called? Us. You know, and I'm sure you've had the same, you know. So the minute the pawpaw hits the fan, we're the first guys that get called. But it does, you know, and like you say, clients are sort of, very jokey pokey about it. And I've often thought about, wills. And if you think about it, it's almost like going to the dentist for me. I don't really want to go. I know I should go, but they might find something that will cause them to have to give me an injection. And I know I'll feel better if I've gone through that. But I think a will also is kind of an admission that, yes, we're not going to live forever. And if something does happen, this is the instructions. But if we put it off and we kind of skirt around it, we don't have to think about it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I've sort of experienced.
From my side, Andrew, thanks for raising that. I've realized over my years of being in this financial game via, trusts, accounting, tax, often what we may perceive as this, clients wanting it all, sometimes I think it's also a case of people don't know what they want until it's presented to them. You don't know what your options are. People have heard certain things, like, for instance, you need to provide for your retirement. Okay. Well, retirement is such a foreign concept when you are 28. It's such a foreign thing. You are just struggling to pay your car, pay your house. You've just got a new baby back, possibly, or 2 new babies, and you are trying to keep your head above water. And now you keep being bombarded with, you have to also cater for retirement. And retirement is such a foreign concept. It's so far off. It is so unreal for you that you can't, you have so many decisions to make in a day that by the time 5 o'clock rolls around, you are completely decision fatigued. That this is a very foreign concept. You can't even deal with that. So often what we perceive as wanting it all is because they actually don't know what they want until they see what they don't want. That's maybe the one thing. It's also that maybe the as you say, they want to first see value. For me, it's about if we know what language they speak. Remember, we all have different values. Wynand absolutely values family time, spending time with his wife, with his children, and being out on his bike. When things get rough and he needs a break, it's him, the mountain bike, and the open road. And no matter what happens, you will not interfere with children time. When it's children bath time, children eat time, that is what happens. Now, I cannot go and try and speak to Wynand about financial things in children bath time. It's not going to compute. I'm wasting everyone's time. And the same goes for me. It's not that I don't value family, but I value maybe alone time, or I value the story data tells me. In other words, how do I connect the dots? If I have the data and I can make the sums and I can tell the story, in other words, how does it then provide for Wynand and his family? Now, the language I speak may land. But if someone wants to speak to me and they want to come to me with come to the kiddie's birthday party, not going to land. But come at me with data, with numbers, and it's going to compute. So sometimes what we need to learn is also how to speak the client's language. So I'm not discounting what you're saying. It's very valuable what you're saying. But sometimes it's a matter of, are we hearing them? Are we speaking their language? And what value is it that they want to see? Because yes, they want to have it all. And sometimes if we can show them what their money can get in a way that matters to them, then it will land better. For me, if you say to me, well, if you invest here, you will make X amount of money. That may not mean anything. But if you say to me, look, if you invest here, you're going to have enough passive income to cover all your day-to-day expenses so you can travel around the world 6 months of the year. Oh yeah, and by the way, as an added bonus, there will be an extra 40 grand there to throw towards a PhD. Now you're speaking my language. You see, so it's all about how you package that. I don't know if that's have any value. Wynand, anything from you on what I've said now?
Yeah, I think there's definitely value in trying to understand, the language that people use and what they aspire to. And I think I've encountered so many clients that just thought they could go and buy a will at CNA and fill it in and it'll be great. And I'm thinking, you don't do your own plumbing.
Yes.
And yet the most important document in your life, you just want to quickly slap it together because you don't want to pay someone money to draft it properly. Or people seem to have, I don't know, Andrew, you might be able to comment on this, but do you also find that people are willing to pay for many things, but when it comes to an executive, they're like, yes, like we just don't want to pay for that. That is just, I mean, what do these people even do? I think that must be one of the worst jobs ever. Now, Renata will probably disagree, but I would never want to do that.
If I may sort of add to that, I think there's two parts that have come out of this. So Renata, what you said about language is absolutely spot on. But I think, we're all CFPs here. So you spend a considerable amount of time understanding this, studying it, learning it, and you only really truly see it, after the fact. So most people, I think human nature is they want to see the value first and then pay for it. Whereas what we do is they pay for it way up front forever and ever and ever, and then the value is only afterwards, and you don't even get to see the value of that because you're 6 feet under. But because I think, and it comes from a place of ignorance, it really does, and I mean that respectfully, as in people don't know what capital gains tax is. I think most people generally have no idea how capital gains tax works, let alone estate duty plus executive fees, etc. So that when we go, then we start throwing these words around, they kind of go, oh, he's pulling a sales pitch on me. And I think that's where their mind kind of goes. And, yes, we have the initials behind our names to say we're experts. But again, that doesn't really mean a hell of a lot to them because, CFP is quite new. But short of someone who actually truly understands finance, the value for a client or a soon to be deceased client really doesn't hold much water to them where they go, yes. So I think that's point one, which we could discuss. I think the other point, and this is probably the bigger one, is that it requires responsibility. It requires taking a very deep, honest look at yourself and what's important to you, what those questions you asked earlier. And very often, as you said earlier, the client actually doesn't know. They don't actually know what they want this thing to look like. And your examples that you guys have brought up were hilarious, but they're frightfully true because people don't actually know any better.
Right, you are.
That's it. That's it. So, and
Andrew, you won't believe it.
Sorry, yes, Wynand?
I had a conversation with a client of mine who's a chartered accountant yesterday. He runs a proper accounting practice. They do, they've got some really big clients. And because he's a junior partner, he can't use our services for everything, but they have got some shares between the partners which are held in trust, and they've got this buy and sell thing going and all the rest of it. And we were doing his estate plan about 3 or 4 years ago, and I said to him, but for goodness sakes, you're a chartered accountant, you're dealing with all these clever high level, like fancy brand advisor guys doing this buy and sell for you. How is it that you've got these shares in the trust and yet the buy and sell agreement is structured between you and your partner? I mean, you're not the parties to this. No. Your trusts are. So that was a few years ago. So yesterday he phoned me up and he says, oh, I can't believe this. They've got these shares in trust in his partners, and they've got now this buy and sell agreement, which is very nice. But these these policies are killing him because his partner is big and smoking and all that, and he's a fit guy. So he's obviously paying a bucket load of premiums towards the policy on his partner's life. I think you've seen this a million times yourself. And I then said to them, but they've got this thing coming out of their loan accounts, as it is. And I said, but why are you guys so insistent on paying your own premiums? This only matters if you own the shares in your own name. Mm-hmm. That's the only time that it matters. You could have anyone else paying the damn things. You could add it up and split it in two. It doesn't matter. The policies are going to be taxed. Finish and claw. Doesn't matter who pays the premiums. It's only if you want that Section 3 sort of exemption if you own the shares in your name. And that, Andrew, I think is where a lot of brokers or advisors get stuck, because they went to business assurance school and they learned this thing of, no premium shall be borne by the deceased, and you have to split it properly, and da, 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 da. But if the assets are in trust, it doesn't count. Yeah.
We didn't read that sentence. Yes, but.
And yeah, you've got some super clever people that are just like going down this track, and it's absolutely pointless. They could have just, added the stuff, split by 2, off they went. So anyway, he's going to propose this now to his partner. He's going to say, listen, we should do this because you're a big fatty.
Well, I'm going to start bungee jumping. It's the other alternative.
Yeah.
But that's true. Hey? That's true. Guys, we've run out of time. It is now way over our time slot. I don't want to keep anyone longer than we should. I'm very, very mindful of your time. And Wynand, I really appreciate you taking time out from your family tonight. I know it's important time for you. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your input and your valuable knowledge with us. I really enjoyed having you here. And guys, thank you for joining us. Andrew and Poonam, thank you. I'm so sorry we didn't have a bigger audience tonight. And like I said, Wynand, I will have this recording available. Poonam, anything else from you? One last question or parting thought from you? If you've got anything, you're welcome to post it. And Andrew, thank you so much for being part of the conversation. We appreciate that. And I hope to see you more regularly now. If you subscribe to the newsletter, then you'll be invited every month to these discussions. So great stuff. Wynand, your hand's up. So if you've got something, you can open your mic, or is that just a wave? Aha. Oh, and you're welcome to come on camera if you want to.
Nearly saw you there.
Yo, okay, you can unmute yourself if you want. I can't unmute you from this side. Not hearing anything. Wynand, you muted if you are talking. Oh, it's not unmuting. I wonder why that is. Because it says I must also unmute. Okay, so if you go to the bottom of your screen, maybe if I stop sharing, it'll be easier. Yeah, I can stop sharing now. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there's the mute and unmute button. Try that quickly. And just see. Because I can't unmute you from my side. I did try. Oh, it's not unmuting. Okay, she says thank you anyway. Okay. Well, that was it, guys. Thank you so much for your time, as always. I really enjoy these classes. I enjoy these discussions. Wynand, thank you for your time. Please thank your wife for me.
Thank you, Renate. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good one. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks.